Turning off the TV. Sometimes things come to an end, or just run their course. My recent article, Walking Away, illustrates this and was written in reference to something else. But this may have been the start of it. I turned off the television. Permanently. I've only done this once before in my life for a few months, and within a week or two started writing my first book. I went back to television and have spent much time, too much time, watching it, thinking about it, and even working my schedule around it back in the day before super convenience and timed recordings. Although I grew up with it, I'm not sure you could say I was one of the TV generation who were put in front of it as a babysitter. I had to haggle and bargain for my television time, against a mother who did not care for technology and wanted me out playing instead. And for that I commend her foresight and observation of my love of it, making sure I went out, but using it where necessary to gain my compliance for chores. Movies have always featured heavily though, more than TV, but of late things have changed. I used to joke that I watched certain movies not as entertainment, but as reference and research, and I meant it, but no one believed me. I would often watch programmes and movies as background noise while doing something else. It wasn't stimulating enough on its own. I used to be captured and enthralled by it growing up though, fully immersed in the audio and visual experience, and my concentration on it almost unbreakable. It may not surprise you to know that my favourite as a child was Alice in Wonderland. The only thing in life that did seem to make sense then, and turns out, now as well. But the box doesn't seem to be what it once was. The unending feed of ridiculous constant adverts, the dull blandness of the programmes and the odd definition of entertainment these days had spelt the end of my relationship with it. There is more going on that requires attention. It's no longer required. And although I may not have regretted the time given to it already, I certainly would if I continue to give it more. There is no need to be distracted by their ideas and images anymore when there are plenty to be had of my own. Research is over. The clock is ticking. Television. I have already speculated on TVs being portals in my article, A Portal, and mentioned some of the following films in it: Nightmare on Elm Street, The Ring, Pleasantville, and Mike TV from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Where there is a merger between the two, or the lines that usually separate the two become blurred, or disappear altogether, and one crosses into the other. And what of that other reality? The one we think is safely behind the screen. 3D images being presented on a 2D screen for us to perceive as a form of reality. To entice and influence, to entertain and distract. Giving us a condensed, fabricated, edited, and glorified version of life. Or at least the version they have written for us, just as they have with history. People realise they have doctored the past to fit what they want people to know. And so too with the present. So even now what you think is happening, or becoming history, is tainted. It will be written how they want it to be remembered, not with what actually happened. You can see how handy being able to label something as misinformation can be. But looking beyond the somewhat fictional aspect to the first part of this article, and knowing that in our physical realm we can't go into the TV, and what is presented on the screen can't escape and take form, we can easily understand how it is used to manipulate and expose people to ideas and concepts they would otherwise not encounter, helping the wheels of consumerism greatly, and how they sought to reshape society on a basic level through mass entertainment. The first fad covers the motivators and methods for that, and turning off the TV covers the realisation of it and taking steps to not be part of that particular angle of programming going forward. Because it's been with us for more than a few generations now, and people's attachment to it and what it represents to them seems to be very ingrained now for many. I've pointed out before how for some, their expectations of themselves and others are based on a carefully crafted, scripted, edited and simulated version of real life, possibly leading to frustrations, confusions and a general lack of understanding of people, or the actual expectations real life would have demanded. because even that is now subject to change. Like the people who shape society are trying to make it more ridiculous, like you would see in the fictional setups. Crazy ideals and people allowed to take centre stage, to dictate and be in charge. If this were a TV show, you can believe they would have lost their audience long ago and would have had to cancel the show. It would have been slated in the reviews and anyone playing a part would have faded into the mist. But as these players are actually the heads of countries, and whoever wrote the script for this seems to be desperately trying to hold it all together, almost writing new characters and storylines as each day goes on, adding even more ridiculousness to the crazy and unbelievable episodes we find ourselves in. Many of us wondering, when is someone finally going to pull the plug? Public eye or evil eye? Our perception of people considered to be in the public eye has changed of late. And to tell the truth, it appeared to be on the turn before the last few years. A slight shift once revelations began to come to light of many potentially being listed in Epstein and Maxwell's Black Book of clients and flight logs. But after seeing a montage of countless famous faces, all doing the classic one eye symbol, synonymous with Masonic symbolism, I thought it funny how they all do the eye and are all in the public eye. We know it's no secret they use entertainment to bewitch and distract us. So is that what it is for? Is it to represent them being watched or them watching us? I see you. Some people waste their entire lives trying to reach the status they hold, which to most people seems unattainable, to achieve the impossible or just dreaming of being one of them. The recent film Free Guy portrayed this well with the use of sunglasses people, the ones who got to be the most glamorous, have the most fun, drive the fast cars, etc. It seems apt. But the act of covering one eye for an image, which is to be used for marketing, could simply be just that. A photographer's trick of the trade to make the image more striking, to bring something else to the composition. Seems like a weak reason, given that it has appeared so many times. But then again, once a special effect is started, many of them copy and use it to death. So perhaps. It is said that the origin of the evil eye symbol, which just happens to be the Eye of Horus, is used by people who have achieved status and success because people would be so jealous and envious of them, they would cause them harm with their malicious glare. So, it's seen as a protection charm from the people who mostly worship and adore you and want to be you. That doesn't sound right. I see it slightly differently, given the use of it within the entertainment industry. And because they like to say the opposite of what something actually is, on that basis, I suspect it is actually to gather energy from those staring, gazing, or whatever thoughts are occurring. And by encouraging people to wear the amulet for it, creates extra energy and binds them to that religion. Maybe, if you work with the rules around superstitious and supernatural possibilities. Sauron, the great eye in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Everything being about this eye trying to monitor and stop you reaching the destination. Big Brother is watching you. Being watched and monitored appears to be part of their mantra, because you can't influence or control people if you don't know where they are, what they are doing, and what they are thinking. And being honest, I now believe there are genuinely a great number of people who are so used to being watched and the internet world being part of their daily routine, that they like it, and would feel a bit lost without it. Even though it is like a long-distance virtual interaction, for some it is now normal. Everyday real life and interactions don't hold the same feelings, emotions or energy, so those things don't have energy invested in them in real life, and they gradually drift away. Maybe that is part of the crossover from real life into the metaverse they like to talk about, where you mentally integrate first and willingly walk away from the world and real life because you didn't make yourself part of it. You then left it behind. I guess that could be said of the internet generally. But as they take away more and more of society and normality, people are being forced online, into the meta creation. And although there may be a great number who welcome it, There are a great number who don't, and have no interest in being part of a monitored, controlled, licensed, regulated, confused, and joyless future. That'll be a no from me, Chuck. Are you not entertained? What is it about entertainment that keeps us enthralled, hooked and distracted by carefully crafted forms and expressions of what we call entertainment? Put there initially to entertain, but seems to be a consuming conveyor of industry now. Once you are in the corporate fold for it, seems you are no longer you. Similar maybe to how we get treated once we are born, as part of the societal cog we are brought up to believe we are so important to. But just as in that structure, you would have workers, soldiers, royalty, etc. There is another layer that gets overlooked as important. Look at the film Ants for a basic on what I mean. It's a good watch, but it's about society, being an individual as well as part of the collective, and saving that society from a nefarious eugenicist plan by the head of the military. But they keep the structure basic as I mentioned, wanting us to liken ourselves to ants and other hive creatures, busying ourselves for our purpose, so the queen can flourish and then repeat the cycle. Yet there is a layer that is always there, in different forms. I'll start from when I think of them being portrayed as an important part of life. Greek tragedies. Theatre performed by actors portraying human nature, myths and traditions, apparently as early as 5 BC. Jesters. Those medieval tricksters that heavily feature in Nephilim stories and appear in the royal courts, to keep the king and queen amused, they say, while on the streets of the average folk having a scaled down, puppeteered version in Punch and Judy. And another custom which is interesting, mostly relevant, but a bit of a tangent here. Plays also became a big thing around the mid-1300s, with theatre performances being encouraged by the church, they say, telling Bible stories and the lives of the saints. Maybe then it was realised that visual propaganda can be a powerful tool. Mop fairs. We still have some around today, but they are known more as fun fairs these days. But back in the day, they were created to match workers with employers, so a job drive really. But off the back of the Black Death, and before the Statute of Cambridge in 1388, covered in my article A Working Strategy, it seems they already found a way to limit and control people, holding local events to create a contract between employer and employee, making the skilled person show their trade by way of a symbol on their persons, straw for farmer, wool for shepherd, and a mop for an unskilled person. Once you had come to an agreement and your employment secured for the year, you were given a token of a shilling and a ribbon to signify you were taken. Sounds all very organised, doesn't it? If not a little weird and controlling. And as a bonus, they started to put on stalls for games, drinking, and for them to be able to spend that token as fast as they got it. It is said, the whole event became a major festival and eventually was condemned for the drunkenness and immorality they encouraged, but still falls into the category of entertainment, to a point, making a very public spectacle of people's skills and ability to pay their own way. I'm sure someone found that very entertaining, as well as humiliating and quite demoralising for the people going through it perhaps. But back to the forms of keeping people enthralled. I can't imagine it really got to take hold until the advent of cameras and moving film, following on from literature in the form of fiction. But again, we are led to believe that most average people were illiterate and couldn't read, only the wealthy and those that had time to partake of fanciful thoughts and ideas. Same with theatre. As time has gone on, we have had a pricing system which determines usually who gets to go, and different types of presentations for those who may have different tastes. Like opera and live music generally, there are many different styles and tastes, and would have been a great source of amusement and enjoyment over the centuries. But again, until technology has allowed us to record and repeat music and songs, it would have been a smaller number at any one time being exposed to it. I will skip to modern times now, with a perfected mechanism of exposure really between all the devices and forms of entertainment. The first fad covered the psychology behind the basics of it back in the 50s, but we can easily see the product of it all around us. Music, games, TV, film, news, and all forms of entertainment condensed and contained to be dipped into when you so wish, no longer having to wait like the good old days, or even stop being entertained by it all if you want it to go on for days, choosing to immerse yourself in another world, written and constructed with distraction in mind, and most people know this. They want this, and rightly so. Sometimes life can be a bit draining, and you do want to switch off for a bit. But do many people give any thought to what it is they are wanting to escape from? Or do they spend time watching to be inspired? It's one thing to have something to complement reality, but it can also be used to escape reality. So it's the individual that needs to decide which one it is. So, in all that, what is the purpose it really serves? What help is it to anyone if you are distracted from your life, not really noticing real things change because you are so used to watching things being the same? And some of those things you watch repeat the things they want you to believe and want you to know. Nothing becomes a billion-dollar enterprise by accident, and certainly not without purpose. So the whole entertainment industry is part of the Hydra, multiple heads of the same beast, creating a strange reality for people to be in. I used to wonder about people who want to be actors, who seem to find it so easy to pretend to be someone else, to essentially lie for a living, and the more convincing you are, the more you are applauded. How do they ever know who they are? If they are any good, of course. But creating a persona to cope or deal with the outside world is possibly a natural thing, or a consequence of our own reaction to how we have become. We may have been different before daily news programmes, newspapers being made a thing for people, and being notified of things whether you were interested or not. Would people have just been concerned with getting on and living? I'll never know, and sometimes think entertainment is a good thing, as it spawns ideas and creativity, indulging an output we apparently never had the chance for before. But as with lots of things that start with good intentions, or have a plus side, there is usually someone or something that will try to take advantage of that. The news is the news. It's taken a strange turn, the world of information and news, reminding me of Casualty, the TV series, which I used to enjoy as a kid. The drama, the tension, the NHS being presented as heroes. Good bit of programming, in more ways than one. But it was a good watch, for a time. I started to go off it when a change to the setup happened, and it took me a while to notice. It slowly stopped being about the person the accident was going to happen to, or had happened to, and shifted away from the victims to focus on the staff, the affairs, the drama, the backstabbing, etc. It became a weird soap opera rather than a medical drama. And although I spent time watching soap operas too in my youth, the constant, crappy and hectic drama of fictitious people eventually made me wonder why I wasted my time watching it, so stopped. As you get older, you start to see a lot more of that hectic drama in real life and people, so no need for a fictional version to run alongside that. But by switching the setup to be about the staff rather than the patient lost me. It was no longer interesting. Anchorman 2, the film. I liked both of them, funny and quite ridiculous, but the sequel was interesting, showing how, on a basic level, when you can't get the scoop or find any real news to report, you either make it up or you be the news. The news becoming the news. And we were on the brink of it, after we went for multiple 24-hour news channels, more newspapers than you really need, constant drivel and information intermingled and filtered through to the masses. And filtered it is. Even the instantaneous internet world is edited and filtered, checked and restricted. So, there is still an overall editor calling the shots and deciding what is fit for public consumption. Or not in some cases, but they go with it anyway. No longer on the brink though. Corporations have fully crossed over into being part of it rather than just reporting it. Weirdly though, not because they don't have real news to report, of that there is plenty, but it doesn't quite fit the narrative that corporate forces want people to follow. And as we know, once you become the observed, you are no longer the observer, and you can't be both. So, the influence that newspapers, TV stations, and faces that represent them is dwindling, and being redefined with everything else. Those faces no longer command respect. As we know, they are just the mouthpieces of the media machine, and are the stupid ones for maybe not seeing it before, thinking they were just there to let us know what's going on. Hardly ever giving thought to the why, just blindly watching news and reading papers, seeing headlines and paying attention, as they call it. Being aware of the world around you, or something like that. But knowing now, it was an awareness steeped in falsities and of what someone else wanted me to know or be aware of. For years we have had invasions of privacy though on their part, investigations into people, well known and otherwise, for exposés, scoops and front page news. However, it seems to have taken a strange turn in the last round of news being the news, and when it's their own, or them being used for news fodder, suddenly it becomes a topic to discuss about rights and privacy. And it is a problem and strange part of society that we have, that people feel the need to tear people down, gossip about others, spread rumours, or just plain old humiliate someone, by way of a publication no less. Why are we like that as a species? Taking delight in other people's misfortune and wanting to see people fail, hoping instead you make it? And then what? Have everyone wishing you had failed instead of being happy for you? It's an odd thing, and I get a smile on my face when I see someone else do good, or have a happy moment. So when trying to imagine what it must be like to see the same thing and feel hate or have a mean feeling towards it, is a difference I can't get on board with. Yet it's one that has been cultivated. You've Been Framed comes to mind here, and I laughed like many others for the silly misfortune that befell people. Slapstick, I guess. The presenter of that show had another that I wasn't so comfortable with. Beadles About. It was good, but painful, and I really felt for the people being wound up and tricked. And really, I found it hard to reconcile that we would cause people untold stress and worry just for entertainment. All laughing at the end when they revealed it was all a joke. But there being a strange tension of, but what if they had died? But what if they had flipped out and hurt someone? I didn't enjoy watching it in the end, as it was screwing with what I believed were real people, real lives, and their emotions. That wasn't entertainment for me personally, and carried over into other programming. Once you can see it's a setup, or people are being used beyond what they think they are there for, it becomes painful to watch. Just like the news. So no longer there for reporting what is going on, they are there to enact a painful script and are being used for purpose, thinking they are there for something else possibly, or are complicit. Either way, it's a struggle to watch and listen anymore. Just like I mentioned in my article, Early News. Why is it really necessary that we are pummeled with information, updates and stats from chosen countries all over the world on a daily basis anyway? So again, and as with much these days, it comes back to, what purpose does it serve, and why? Early news. Back in the day, we are led to believe the masses couldn't read and were generally illiterate. So how did they get the news and all that necessary info to know what was going on in the world? They didn't. And as far as I can tell, it wasn't required. You didn't actually need to know what was going on in a town or village far away at any given moment, let alone other countries. It seems we are a bit obsessed now with the news. Having gone from newspapers and set times for programmes, it's now relentless and continuous. But if you did need a way for people to be informed with what you wanted them to know, I see how maybe the town crier would have been the first talking newspaper, before printed ones, shouting whatever the general folk needed to be aware of. Seems even more intrusive than these days, where you can avoid it, to a point. Because they require it for the continuous charade of politics, democracy, emergencies and so on. It moved on from shouting the news at people, to newspapers as mentioned above. Once everyone was educated enough to read them, of course. Even within that, they still managed to have class divides, as with the rest of society too, giving the impression that only smart people in suits read newspapers, or people of a certain background. Must have realised they were missing out on lots of money and ways of manipulation, so the daily rags were put out there. And how did they make this accessible to everyone before television? Newsagents? Sounds quite formal really, doesn't it? Agents of the news, to distribute and pass on whatever was deemed important by editors and their financiers, to move and sway public opinions and wants in a certain direction. And this is where many have turned unwittingly into a town crier, now given the platform of self-publishing and social media, probably myself included, noting the irony when someone says they can't believe people haven't heard all the impending changes or devious organisations behind it all, so they brief them, thereby ensuring that person is now aware. But it's a double-edged sword, because it also spreads the propaganda and makes sure it filters through to even the most distant and unconnected folk, even though it's no secret and we are seeing very real actions as a consequence of those organisations. Some people aren't equipped to deal with it all mentally, either ignoring it or just plainly not seeing it, or that if they do, not seeing the problem. Not after such an exhaustive few years. So I can see why there may appear to be apathy towards it. Others just don't have the capacity to see where it goes, or understand the further consequence to come. But whatever does happen, you can bet there will be a carefully crafted and laid out story to appear when needed, for distraction and entertainment, and to keep the focus shifting from one thing to another, hoping that no one will see how it starts to tie in.